You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Arya Whitner, and this is your NXT update for Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. It is the final show of the most recent set of tapings, as they're back to taping at Full Sail tomorrow night for a brand new show starting next week. And I must say, usually the last show that they tape, gets the worst crowd reactions. But the crowd was pretty into this week's show, and let's run it down here for you. We start with a tag team match playa, as the ongoing battle between the iconic duo Billie Kay, Peyton Royce, and Ruby Riott continues. You might recall last week, Mr. William Regal informed Ruby Riott that because she's not Lars Sullivan, that she has to get a tag team partner because she's not allowed to have a handicap match. Despite this, Ruby Riott didn't bother to actually get a tag team partner, and the match just started as a 2-on-1 handicap match. Unfortunately, that really was the worst idea for Ruby Riott, as about a minute into the match, she was getting her butt kicked rather handily, I might add, by Billie and Peyton, when Nikki Cross randomly crept out from the backstage area to observe the match from ringside. Later on in the match, Kay accidentally hit Royce with a punch to the face. Riott began her comeback, and as she backed up to the corner to begin readying herself for a big what a maneuver, Nikki Cross jumped up onto the apron and tagged herself in, which apparently is perfectly legal. The fans loved this as Cross destroyed both Kay and Royce, laying Billie out with a twisting fisherman suplex. Cross tagged back out to Riott and walked away back through the crowd that she came through, and then Riott pinned Kay with a top rope senton. We got a recap of last week's altercation with Johnny Gargano and the team of Tito Sabatelli and Riddick Moss at the Performance Center, and that led to an announcement of a match later tonight. Backstage, No Way Jose called Lars Sullivan a freak. 3 weeks ago in Brooklyn, Jose was just trying to fiesta with the fans when Sullivan cowardly attacked him. He brought up Lars beating him up last week. He didn't mention, by the way, that, he did mention that Lars had just beaten up 3 men, but he didn't point out that Jose has a babyface cowardly attacked Lars Sullivan, and then Lars, the heel, beat the crap out of a 4th man. Anyway, Jose decided that he hasn't gotten beaten up enough and challenged Lars to a match next week. Speaking of matches, Johnny Gargano was out next to take on Riddick Moss, who was the one to accept the challenge. And of course, he had Sabatelli in his corner. Moss, if you've only seen a picture of the two of them together between Moss and Sabatelli, Moss is a little bit larger than him, a little bit thicker than him, is a former football player, which, describes almost every non-independent wrestler in the Performance Center. But the story, even before the little altercation last week, was that back in May, there was a tag team match playa with DIY and Moss and Sabatelli, which was DIY's last TV match before breaking up. Moss spent the first few minutes ragdolling Gargano before Johnny Wrestling tried to get something going, but he ran face first into Moss's massive elbow. Moss beat on him for close to 5 minutes until he made the mistake to bellow that Gargano was nothing without DIY, which spurned Gargano's comeback. Sabatelli tried interfering at one point, but to no avail, as first Gargano locked on the Gargano escape. Moss powered his way to the ropes, which for a minute befuddled Johnny, but he pulled himself together and picked up the win with the slingshot spear through the ropes. The Street Profits were out next for a tag team match playa. And one day I really hope the importance of Montez Ford's Red Solo Cup is explained. Obviously, a lot of these fans are people who go to the NXT house shows and Street Profits. Who knows, maybe there's no real purpose for him having a Red Solo Cup all the time. But of all the random props in the world, that's, in my opinion, one of the lamer props to just randomly have. There's no rhyme or reason for it. He's not drinking out of it. He doesn't have a giant foreign object hidden in the red Solo Cup. It's just a red Solo Cup. Their opponents this week are the returning Ealys brothers, Gabriel and Uriel. The Ealys are not only winless on TV, but also once upon a time, you might recall, they got massacred by a rampaging Samoa Joe. Uriel started, and by the way, I feel like I say this every time they wrestle, it's not Muriel with an M, it's Uriel with a U. But Uriel with a U started with the biggest heat that you can imagine doing in a Street Profits match. He stole Angelo Dawkins' headband. That fiend. And at that point, folks, it was on. They gave both Ealys the old Midnight Express leapfrog that the Haas and Benjamin stole, where one holds their opponent over the top rope and the other jumps over the other with a sitting splash. The Ealys did get a brief heat segment on Ford, and by brief I mean I couldn't even finish typing out that sentence by the time Ford tagged Dawkins back in. The Profits won with their combination spinebuster frog splash and celebrated in the crowd. Up next, we had a video package looking at the entire 2-year NXT career of the undefeated, undisputed, all-time record-holding NXT Women's Champion, the Empress of Tomorrow, Asuka. And this led to Mr. William Regal stating that he has a lot of things to think over, but he will let us know in the next few weeks what will happen in regards to the NXT Women's title. Next week, Aleister Black will cut his first promo ever. And then it was time for the main event. And before the main event, Christy St. Cloud, who is the blonde backstage interviewer who I've said in the past, and this isn't fair to her, I'm sure, but she has a name that sounds like a porn actress. She kind of looks like she's a porn actress. It's not fair to her, I'm sure. I'm sure she's a nice young lady. I'm sure she's never done porn, but I'm sorry. That's just... She would have made a good companion of Val Venus if this was the Attitude Era, is all I'm saying. Anyway, Wolfgang said he's never been more ready for a match in his life. He beat Tyler Bate a few weeks ago in their tag team match playa, and tonight will take the UK title away from Pete Dunne. And then a few minutes later, Pete Dunne was asked a similarly stupid question, and he just refused to answer and walked away. And so that led to our main event, the UK title on the line, Pete Dunne and Wolfgang. There have probably been, I believe, 4 or maybe 5 televised UK title matches between NXT and the UK tournament final and TakeOver. And this was probably the weakest of the matches, but that's not to say it was a bad match by any stretch of the imagination, just that, when you compare it to some of those prior matches, this one isn't quite as good. If you recall, 3 weeks ago, Dunne and Wolfgang defeated Mustache Mountain. And before the match, Wolfgang told Dunne that he wanted a title shot, and here we go. And speaking of things I know I say every time that they wrestle, but Pete Dunne is a star. And it really can't be said enough how much that Chicago match with Tyler Bate made him a bigger star to the U.S. crowd. And I know I say this a lot, but it bears repeating. If you have never watched that match at NXT TakeOver Chicago between Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate, I don't know what you're doing listening to me. Press pause. Go to the WWE Network. Go. I'm sure somebody has it up on YouTube. Go watch that match. Enjoy the match. Love the match. Mark out for the match. Then come back. Listen to the rest of this magnificent update. And, you'll be a happy person for it. So, with that out of the way, Wolfgang was content with trying to out-wrestle the champion, but Dunne, who can easily out-wrestle anybody, decided to battle back with punches and a DDT on the ring apron, which, by the way, is the hardest part of the ring. Back in the ring, Dunne slept on a double wrist lock, but Wolfgang powered out of it and turned it into his own suplex. Wolfgang moved like a cruiserweight as he used both a tope and a lion salt, but Dunne fought back with the X-Plex. Wolfgang came back and went for a senton, but Dunne got his knees up and turned it into an armbar briefly. Finally, Dunne picked up the win, retained the title with the bitter end. Just again, Pete Dunne, still your champion. And unfortunately, though, much like a whole bunch of NXT episodes, just when you think it's over, it's not really over. Pete Dunne is celebrating in the ring another successful title defense when out runs the Undisputed Era. And in case you haven't been catching up on the news lately, the Undisputed Era is, in fact, the team name for Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, and Kyle O'Reilly. They all ran out to confront Dunne. Dunne appeared ready to walk away, but he changed his mind and punched, I think, O'Reilly in the face. It doesn't matter because all three then ganged up on him and beat the holy living hell out of him. Wolfgang ran in for the save for his former partner and his foe, but he got overwhelmed as well. Now Pete Dunne, now seeing that he's just been beaten up 3-1, he's now seeing that his former partner and his foe a few minutes earlier, who just saved his butt, is getting beaten up. Pete Dunne turned around and walked away. He teased getting back in the ring, but instead what he really was doing was grabbing his title belt before walking off again. Cole finished off Wolfgang with a super kick before the three of them left through the crowd. Tyler Bate and Trent Seven ran down to check on Wolfgang as the show went off the air. So Mr. Regal told them last week that if they wanted to do any more fighting, they had to do it in the ring. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did. But that does it for another fun, fantastic week of NXT. I want to thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you again in 7 days.